Hardly. 17-year-old Sarah, with her long blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, seemed like any other girl in her suburban town. She excelled in school, played tennis, and had a close-knit group of friends. But beneath the surface, a darkness festered. Sarah's home life was far from idyllic. Her parents, consumed by their careers, were emotionally distant. They showered her with material possessions but neglected her emotional needs. Sarah craved attention and validation. She sought it in the admiration of her peers, but it was never enough. A deep-seated insecurity took root within her, leaving her feeling unseen and insignificant. This gnawing emptiness fueled a dangerous desire for control and power. She longed for something more, something to make her feel alive and important. The new girl, Jessica, was everything Sarah was not: outgoing, carefree, and effortlessly cool. Mark, captivated by her easy charm, began to distance himself from Sarah. He canceled dates, his eyes lingered on Jessica a little too long, and his texts became infrequent and curt. Sarah felt her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Jealousy, like a venomous snake, coiled itself around her heart, squeezing out all reason and logic. One evening, consumed by her rage and desperation, Sarah decided to confront Jessica. She found her at the local park, sitting alone on a bench. As Sarah approached, her heart pounded in her chest, a deafening drumbeat of anger and fear. Words tumbled out of her mouth, accusations and threats laced with venom. Jessica, taken aback by Sarah's fury, tried to defend herself, but it was too late. Blinded by jealousy and consumed by a terrifying sense of entitlement, Sarah lashed out. She grabbed a heavy rock from the ground and struck Jessica repeatedly. The world seemed to spin as a horrifying silence descended upon the park. Jessica lay still, her lifeblood staining the grass crimson. In the immediate aftermath of her horrific act, a strange calmness washed over Sarah. The shock acted like a numbing agent, dulling the edges of her horror and replacing it with a chilling practicality. There was no time for remorse, no space for guilt. She had to disappear Jessica, erase her presence from the world as if she had never been. Sarah's mind, honed by years of academic excellence, turned into a calculating machine. She needed an alibi, a plausible narrative that would deflect suspicion. She couldn't be placed at the park that night. A plan began to form, intricate and chillingly logical. She would use her intelligence, her knowledge of people and their weaknesses, to craft a web of deceit so impenetrable, no one would ever suspect her. Her first move was to dispose of the murder weapon. The blood-stained rock, a heavy weight in her trembling hands, was tossed into the murky depths of the nearby river. Next, she got rid of her blood-soaked clothes, burning them in the dead of night in her backyard fire pit. Every action, every calculated step, solidified her resolve. She was in control, the master puppeteer of her own twisted play. With the physical evidence gone, Sarah turned her attention to crafting her alibi. She would use her relationship with Mark, twisting his affections to her advantage. She called him, her voice trembling with feigned distress, claiming she had seen Jessica with another boy, their interaction heated and filled with anger. She played the part of the concerned friend, planting seeds of doubt about Jessica's whereabouts and intentions. The next day, when news of Jessica's disappearance spread through the town like wildfire, Sarah was ready. She donned a mask of grief, her eyes red-rimmed with fake tears. She comforted Jessica's friends, offering empty platitudes and expressing shock and disbelief. She even went so far as to console Mark, offering him a shoulder to cry on, while subtly reinforcing the lie she had spun the night before. Her deception was flawless. She played the role of the grieving friend, all the while reveling in her own twisted game. Sarah's confidence grew with each passing day. She had fooled everyone. They believed her, trusted her. The illusion of invincibility she had so carefully constructed around herself felt impenetrable. She had gotten away with murder, or so she thought. Section 5. The investigation begins. Whispers and suspicions. The small town, shaken to its core by Jessica's disappearance, buzzed with speculation. The police, initially treating it as a missing persons case, soon discovered inconsistencies. Whispers of jealousy, rumors of a love triangle, and Sarah's strange, almost too perfect demeanor, all pointed towards something more sinister. Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp instincts and unwavering determination, was brought in to lead the case. He had a knack for seeing through facades, for detecting the subtle tells that betrayed even the most skilled liars. And something about Sarah, her overly rehearsed grief, Her eagerness to provide alibis set off alarm bells in his mind. He started by interviewing those closest to Jessica, carefully piecing together the events leading up to her disappearance. He learned about the rivalry between Sarah and Jessica, the love triangle with Mark, and the heated confrontation at the park, a detail Sarah had conveniently omitted from her narrative. Section 6. Unraveling the Truth, Cracks in Her Facade. As Detective Miller delved deeper into the investigation, he noticed discrepancies in Sarah's story. Her alibi, meticulously crafted, began to crumble under scrutiny. Witnesses contradicted her timeline, placing her at the park around the time of Jessica's disappearance. The web of lies she had woven, once seemingly impenetrable, began to unravel thread by thread. Forensic evidence, while circumstantial, further implicated Sarah. Microscopic fibers found on Jessica's clothing matched those from the rug in Sarah's car. Tire tracks found near the park, though faint, were consistent with the tires on Sarah's vehicle. The evidence, while not conclusive, was enough to cast a shadow of doubt on her carefully constructed facade. Detective Miller, sensing Sarah's growing unease, decided to increase the pressure. He brought her in for questioning, not as a suspect, but as a witness. He presented the evidence he had gathered, watching her closely for any signs of guilt or fear. Sarah, though outwardly calm, couldn't hide the flicker of panic in her eyes. The walls were closing in. Section 7. Closing in. The walls are closing in. The interrogation room, cold and sterile, felt like a pressure cooker. Detective Miller, with his calm demeanor and piercing gaze, sat across from Sarah, his every word, every question chipping away at her carefully constructed facade. He laid out the evidence, piece by piece, watching as the color drained from her face. He spoke about the fibers, the tire tracks, the inconsistencies in her story. He mentioned the witnesses who had placed her at the park, their testimonies contradicting her carefully crafted alibi. With each revelation, Sarah's composure crumbled a little further, her carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of his words. "We know you were there, Sarah," Detective Miller said, his voice calm but firm. "We know what happened that night. It's time to stop lying to yourself and everyone else." His words, sharp as a razor, cut through the silence, leaving Sarah exposed and vulnerable. Section 8. Capture and Confession. The Illusion Shatters. The weight of the evidence, the relentless pressure from Detective Miller, and the crushing guilt that had been gnawing at her conscience proved to be too much for Sarah to bear. The illusion of invincibility she had so carefully constructed around herself shattered into a million pieces. Tears streamed down her face as the weight of her actions crashed down upon her. In a choked voice, Sarah confessed to everything. She spoke of her jealousy, her rage, and the moment she snapped, her hand crushing Jessica's skull with the rock. She described how she had disposed of the evidence, crafted her alibi, and manipulated those around her. Her confession, raw and filled with remorse, painted a chilling picture of a young woman consumed by her own demons. As her words echoed through the interrogation room, a sense of relief washed over Detective Miller. Justice would be served. Jessica's murder would not go unpunished. But beneath the satisfaction, there was also a profound sense of sadness. A young life had been lost, another forever scarred by the tragedy. Section 9. Justice and Remorse. Facing the Consequences. News of Sarah's arrest sent shockwaves through the community. The girl they thought they knew, the model student with a bright future, was now a confessed killer. Her trial was swift, the evidence against her overwhelming. The jury, their faces grim, found her guilty of first-degree murder. As the judge read out the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, Sarah felt a wave of despair wash over her. Gone was the illusion of invincibility, replaced by the harsh reality of her actions. She had traded her freedom for a moment of blind rage, her life now confined to the cold, unforgiving walls of a prison cell. In the years that followed, Sarah dedicated herself to atoning for her crime. She participated in prison rehabilitation programs, counseling other inmates and speaking out against youth violence. She could never bring Jessica back, but she could honor her memory by trying to make a difference in the world she had so tragically wronged. The guilt and remorse would stay with her forever, a constant reminder of the devastating consequences of her actions. She had learned the hard way that there was no escaping the truth, no outrunning the consequences of her sins. Justice had been served, but the scars of that fateful night would forever remain.